Last week, the New Zealand Green Investment Finance chairperson Cecilia Tarrant announced she's stepping down. Now, this is a government initiative. It's a green investment bank. And it's getting scrutiny about its management of a $145 million loan to SolarZero, a solar company, which is owned, believe it or not, by BlackRock, one of the biggest sort of corporate conglomerates in the globe, if not the biggest. It was put into liquidation late last month with some really shocking stories coming about how the New Zealand management said, can we please pay the staff? And they said, nah, let's just squeeze everything out of it before we can pull the pin. Cecilia Tarrant is absolutely, she's immensely proud of the progress made in the more than 30 deals that the New Zealand Green Investment Fund has funded with taxpayers' money. And apparently she leaves the role with confidence in the foundation we've built, and she wishes the organisation every success. She was basically told by Nicola Willis to pack her bags and go because they had a meeting and then she resigned. So that's just the old, I've decided to step away from my role. In other words, I've been told don't come Monday. She said New Zealand... so, look, interesting. And I think interesting in the wider context of green investment, net zero targets, and whether or not, man-made climate change is going to continue to be such a big thing. To talk about this and the collapse of SolarZero, we're joined by ACT MP Todd Stephenson. Todd, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sean, for having me on.
$145 million. So we loaned that money to SolarZero, the government, right?
Yeah, we had a facility of up to, the government, basically the financing company, put in $145 million. I think about 115 of it had been drawn down, so that's what we're on the hook for as taxpayers.
Are we going to get any of that back?
I would very much doubt it, Sean, but look, that's really up to the receivers.
But BlackRock could have that much money, in fact, considerably more.
Yes, well, they're obviously the owners of SolarZero, look, and they obviously couldn't make it work. I think that's really interesting. And look, I've got to say, I really feel, you mentioned it in your intro, Sean, we've got 165 employees who are now basically owed money, and there's no guarantee that they're going to get paid. And, BlackRock obviously saw that SolarZero couldn't make it work, and they've pulled the pin. And I think that really is a cautionary tale. What we've got here is an investment company backed by the New Zealand taxpayer, which is obviously, lending money in areas where it shouldn't be.
Well, that's my question. How much money, how much funds does the New Zealand Green Investment Fund have available to it, or how much has it spent so far?
Well, it has many hundreds of millions of dollars, Sean, and in this particular case, there's a couple of things that particularly worry me. One is, if commercial financing can't be raised for these green initiatives, then I think, that taxpayers shouldn't be doing it, right? We need actually to have
That's a bit like mainstream media. If you can't make a profit, why should we just pay you to be in business?
Correct, and you and I could talk about that for many hours. And then the other issue with this is the New Zealand Green Investment Fund actually got other investors to come in with it on this SolarZero. So they actually had a facility of $365 million, and 145 of that was from the New Zealand taxpayer. But that actually concerns me because where these other investment companies or, other investors putting money into this loan facility thinking, this New Zealand government-backed thing thinks it's okay, maybe it is. And that's got real questions about our credibility on global credit markets. So there's quite a few things to unpack here, Sean, and it's very, very concerning. And
you say we won't get that money back. Can't we sue BlackRock, who owned the company, for not paying the bills, or were we not smart enough to set it up like that?
Look, obviously the receivers will be going through all of those details now. As you know, your employees are owed money. There'll be contractors owed money. There'll be companies that have provided the solar panels that'll be owed money, and then obviously there'll be people who have provide financing, like the New Zealand Green Investment Finance Company. So they'll be working through all of that detail, and we'll see whether anyone gets any money back.
All right. Look, Todd, in a wider context, and gosh, the election of President Trump in America has changed a lot of things and changed a lot of debates, I think, or is indicative of a huge change in a lot of global debates. And one of those debates, I have to say, is climate change. And it would seem to me that the pushback against the kind of climate change panic has begun. And maybe these very lofty goals around net zero and the Paris Accord and everything, as we see that the predictions and the computer modelling for global chaos and disaster simply don't come true, that it might be a good time to push pause on some of these initiatives, like the New Zealand Green Investment Fund, and, I don't know, just take a more cautionary rather than extreme approach.
I think you're right. I think we need to take a much more considered approach. I mean, one of the areas that ACT's been very concerned about is, how are we going to penalise our very efficient farmers and agricultural sector in New Zealand, or are we actually going to support them because they are actually the most, efficient farmers in the world? But you're very right, Sean. I think there just needs to be, we need to think very seriously about how we're going to, tackle climate change, but how we're going to do it in a responsible way that doesn't actually put the taxpayers on the hook for a lot of money, or also, damage really valuable parts of the New Zealand economy.
Todd, I'm going to ask you straight up, do you believe, there isn't a serious, credible threat to the future of the planet from man-made climate change?
Well, I think there's definitely a threat. I think we need to balance that about how we actually deal with it and what are the best ways to deal with it.
What's the threat of?
Well, that temperatures do rise and make some things more difficult to do, right?
And some things easier to do.
Correct. So that's why I think we need to take a balanced approach. I mean, I think the interesting thing about this whole SolarZero debacle, Sean, is actually it shows technology and things are changing very, very quickly, right? I mean, actually, solar technology is changing rapidly. It's actually much, much cheaper now. And so what the government should actually be doing is making it easier for private initiatives to move forward, and whether that's renewable energy like RRA reform, or, actually changing some of the standards around electricity and how people can sell electricity back to the national grid. They're the things that the government should focus on, not actually investing in picking winners in particular areas, right? It should stay in its lane.